The billionaire was on his knees in the snow, screaming for his mother, like a little kid. And I was pretty sure I was about to die right there on his front steps with her in my arms. Tell me something. If you found somebody's 78-year-old mom wandering barefoot in the freezing dark, and helping her might get you arrested, do you still help or do you keep walking? Be honest with yourself before you say it out loud. Because that question is the reason you're hearing my voice right now and not reading my name in some quiet obituary for an unidentified male found frozen. My name is Thomas Wheeler Hartwell. Now back then it was just Thomas Wheeler, and even that didn't always show up in a system. No ID, no social, no safety net, nothing. And I'm going to tell you exactly how a night that should have killed me turned me into a son in a billionaire's family, put me through college, and built a foundation that's now keeping other kids alive. And I promise you this, the twist in the middle is not what you think, so stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. So let me start from where it really started, not with the mansion, not with the snow, but with the eviction, because that was the moment I ran out of later. I was 19, and I had exactly $17.43 in my pocket, plus a backpack. That was all of it. That was my entire net worth, my whole life. And a guy everybody called Mr. Tommy was standing in the doorway of the boarding house with his hands on his hips, breath smoking in the December air, telling me, "Kid, I've been patient, but you're 3 weeks behind. I got a business to run. You gotta go." And I'm standing there begging. I'm not proud of it. But I said, "I've got a job interview tomorrow. Warehouse loading dock. They said they're hiring. If I get it, I can get you Friday." And he just shook his head, not even mean, just tired. And that almost made it worse because anger. You can fight, pity you can't. So I packed 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, toothbrush, water bottle, old harmonica my mom gave me, and at the very bottom, wrapped in plastic, like treasure, this blanket. That used to be hers. My mom died when I was 16, county hospital cancer. No insurance, no miracle, just slow disappearing. And after she was gone, that blanket was all I had left, that still smelled like her, and I swore I was never letting anything happen to it. That promise did not make it 12 hours. So now I'm outside. It's already below freezing and dropping fast and look cold. When you have a house is annoying. Cold when you don't have a house is violence. I don't care what anybody says. You can argue policy and personal choices in the comments later. But if you've never had to walk just to stay alive because sitting still means your body shuts down, you don't actually know. Cold. I mean that with love. The shelters are full, because of course they are, and the warming center doesn't open until morning, which is great for people who somehow manage to stay alive until morning, but not super helpful at 9 p.m. when your hand's already hurt. So I start walking, because that's what you do when you're homeless. You walk, you keep moving so you don't freeze, you keep to yourself. You make yourself small around cops. You keep your eyes down around rich people. You learn the rules, and somehow, walking like that, head down, hands jammed in the pockets of this busted Goodwill jacket I bought 2 winters ago for $5. I end up in this part of town where the houses don't even look like houses, you know what I mean? They look like somebody told an architect, "Design me a bank, but make it sexy." Stone walls, perfect hedges, those iron gates with the curls and the gold spikes on top, cameras at every corner. Driveways curved like racetracks. Nothing is small, nothing is old, nothing is cheap, and nothing is mine. Now here's a detail some people don't like to hear, but it's important when you are a skinny black teenager walking alone after dark in a rich white neighborhood. You don't look around, you don't stop and stare, you don't linger. You keep it moving because all it takes is one neighbor with a phone, and suddenly you're suspicious, and suspicious turns into, "Let me see your hands," and that turns into, "Face the car." And I'd already lived that once. I wasn't looking for a sequel. So I'm walking, keeping my head down, trying to decide which direction will get me back to a part of the city where I can exist without a patrol car slowing down to look at me when I hear it. Crying. Not drunk crying, not angry crying, scared crying. Thin, shaky old. And I freeze. Everything in me said, keep going. This is not your problem. This is how you get in trouble. This is how you get blamed for something you did not do, and I'm telling you right now, I almost listened. I almost walked. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I was some fearless hero. I was 19, and I had survival instincts, like a cornered animal. But I walked down this little cut between two huge stone walls, and that's when I see her. This older woman, silver hair, all loose and wild, house slippers, thin nightgown with little blue flowers, no coat, no socks, holding a picture frame to her chest, like it's the only thing keeping her from floating away. And she's shaking so hard her teeth are chattering, and she's whispering, I have to find William. He's waiting for me at the train station. I'm late. I'm so late. And my stomach just drops because I've seen that look before my grandmother had that same clouded look. Toward the end, Alzheimer's is a thief. It steals the map out of your mind and then laughs while you panic. So I put my hands up in this calm way, palms out, no sudden moves, because the last thing I want is to scare her worse. And I say real soft, Ma'am, are you okay? Are you lost? Can I help you find home? And she turns toward me like she's trying to focus through fog, and she says, Eleanor, my name is Eleanor. I need to find my son, William. He'll be worried I can't be late. He's waiting for me. And then she starts crying again. This tiny, helpless crying that hits me right in the center of my chest, because she's freezing, and she doesn't even understand she's freezing. And this is the moment right here. This is where everything could have ended and none of the rest of my life would have happened, so listen close. I did not call 911. Now if you're about to jump in the comments like, bro, why didn't you just call the cops? Let me explain something, and I need you to actually sit with this before you answer. When you are a homeless black kid in a rich gated neighborhood, you don't belong in at night, standing next to an elderly white woman in a nightgown, who is confused and can't explain why you're there. And she doesn't know your name, doesn't know who you are, can't tell a straight story. You are not helping. You are the suspect. I knew that not because I was paranoid, but because I'd already lived it. When I was 16, there was this guy, older white dude, drunk, passed out on the sidewalk, bleeding from his head. I tried to sit him up. I yelled for someone to call an ambulance. And when the cops rolled up, they didn't ask me if I was okay. They slammed me onto the hood and started patting me down like I'd just knocked him out and robbed him. And I'm yelling, I didn't touch his wallet. And they're telling me shut up. And the only reason I didn't get hauled off that night was because the guy finally came around and slurred, nah, kid didn't do nothing. So yeah, call the cops. That's not always the safe move for kids like me. Sometimes it's the opposite. So no, I didn't call 911. I looked at her and said, okay, Eleanor. We're going to figure it out together. We're going to find William all right. We'll get you home. And I offered her my arm, and she let me hold her like she trusted me, like I was safe. And I can't even explain to you what that felt like because I didn't feel like anybody's safe at that point in my life. I felt like a problem. People stepped around. We start walking slow, like really slow, because she's shuffling, and the ground is already slick and hard. And her feet, listen to me. Her feet are bare in house slippers on ice. Her ankles are turning red and blotchy, and I can feel her whole body shaking when she leans on me, and I'm thinking she's going to get frostbite. If we don't get her inside soon, she's going to fall, hit her head something. And I don't know whose mansion is, whose everything on that street looks like money threw up everywhere. So I do the only thing I can do. I take off my jacket and wrap it around her shoulders and look. This was the only jacket I had. I'm already cold. I'm already underdressed. And the second I put that jacket on her, I feel the wind go straight through my shirt and into my bones. And she looks at me like she just woke up in her own body for half a second and says, "But now you'll be cold." And I lie, I say, "I'm tougher than I look." And she actually smiles at me, and for a couple minutes, she walks a little steadier, like just having somebody with her calms her down. We walk like that for maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30. I don't know, time starts stretching out because I can't feel my hands already. And you lose track when you're that cold. But I remember her legs starting to buckle. I remember her saying, "I'm so tired. Can we rest? Please?" And I look around desperate, and I see this property with a huge stone entrance and big front columns and gates that look like they cost more than I've ever touched in my life. And next to the gate, there's this little alcove built into the wall, kind of out of the wind and down low. Near the base of that wall, there's a vent pushing out warm air. Not a lot, not like a heater, just enough to make the air feel like maybe it won't kill you in 5 minutes. That vent, I'm telling you right now, that little stupid vent saved both our lives. I get her sitting. I sit down right next to her. I pull her in against me so my body's between her and the wind. And then I do the thing I swore I would never, ever do. I open my backpack and I pull out my mother's blanket, the last piece of her I had, and I wrap it around Eleanor and around me. And I tuck the edges under our legs to trap whatever heat we can still hold. And that moment was the first time in 3 years I let that blanket touch anybody but me. And I remember thinking, "Mom, I'm sorry. I know I said I'd keep it safe, but I gotta use it. She'll die if I don't." And I wrapped us both up in my mother like that. For hours, that was our whole world, me. Eleanor and that blanket sitting in a stone alcove outside a mansion that wasn't ours, huddled over a weak breath of warm air. And it sounds almost peaceful when I say it that way, but it wasn't. It was brutal. Every part of me hurt. My fingers burned first, then went numb, same with my toes. And there's this scary moment when the shaking stops. It sounds better. But it's not, because when you stop shivering in that kind of cold, it's because your body's running out of fight. You're sliding into hypothermia, and I knew it. I'm not a doctor, but I'd seen stuff, and I knew it. And the whole time I'm talking to keep us awake, because if she falls asleep like that, if she drifts off in that cold, she might not wake up. So I'm telling her stories about my mom, telling her about how my mom used to sing even when she couldn't hold a note, about how she worked 3 jobs and still found time to help me with homework at the kitchen table. And Eleanor's talking about her son William, how he's stubborn and works too hard and doesn't listen, and she keeps calling me Richard sometimes, which I figure out is her late husband's name, and sometimes she thinks I'm her son, and sometimes she sounds perfectly clear and asks me questions like, "Do you have somewhere warm to go?" And I just lie and say, "Yeah, I'm fine," because I don't want her panicking about me on top of everything else. At one point, I don't even remember exactly when, maybe close to midnight, she reaches up with this little shaking hand and touches my face, and her eyes go focused. Really focused, like for 1 second, the disease takes a step back and lets her through, and she says, "Your mother raised you right. She'd be proud of you." And man, I almost lost it right there. I felt tears on my face, and the tears actually hurt because they started to freeze on my skin. I was holding a stranger and crying quietly into her hair so she wouldn't hear me fall apart. Around 2 in the morning, I couldn't feel my feet at all. Around 3, I started drifting. You know when your mind starts floating and you're seeing warm places that aren't there. I saw my mom. I saw her like she was standing in front of me. I heard her voice telling me to hold on. And every time I drifted like that, I'd snap back and whisper into Eleanor's ear, "Stay with me, okay? Don't go to sleep. I've got you." And she'd whisper back so small like a kid, "Don't leave me alone." And I'd say, "Never," and I meant it. And then right when I was sure this was it, headlights. Bright white cutting across the snow and lighting up that stone like daylight. Doors slamming. Footsteps on marble, hard, fast, panicked. And then this voice, this grown man's voice cracking like a little boy yelling, "Mom, oh my God, Mom." And I can barely move, but I force my eyes open because I need to see if she's okay. I need to see that somebody came for her, and I see this man, maybe late 40s, expensive coat flying open, running full speed toward us with his face twisted in horror, and Eleanor breathes out, "William!" And I know this is him, this is her son, this is the person she'd been trying to find all night. He drops down in the snow and grabs her, and he's shaking and saying, "Mom, Mom." And I'm trying so hard to tell him she's alive, she's breathing. I kept her warm, we made it, but my voice just won't come out. And then everything goes black. Next thing I know, warmth. Real warmth, heavy blankets, hot air. This deep ache in my fingers and toes that feels like fire waking up in my bones. And I hear machines beeping, slow and steady. And I know I'm in a hospital. And the first words out of my mouth, I swear this is true, are not, "Am I okay?" They're, "Is she okay?" And a nurse with kind eyes and tired hands leans over me and says, "She's okay. Sweetheart, mild hypothermia, but she's stable because of you." And I start crying. Ugly crying. The kind where you can't breathe right. And she just lets me. She holds my wrist real gentle so I don't pull the IV out. And I'm thinking, thank God. Thank God I didn't let her die in the snow. And then I look up, and my stomach drops again because there are two cops in the room. And that man from the mansion, Eleanor's son, is standing right there too, still in that expensive coat. His eyes are red like he hasn't stopped crying since he found us. And I think, okay, here it comes. Here's where they ask me why I was near his house. Here's where they ask me if I tried to rob her. Here's where they say, "Tell us what really happened," in that voice that already decided I'm lying. That is not what happened. The woman cop steps forward, older black lady, with this "don't mess with me" posture badge on her belt, voice calm but serious, and she says, "Son, you're not in trouble, we just need to understand what happened." And I can't even explain the way my brain glitched when she said, "You're not in trouble." Like those words didn't even fit together in a way I understood. And I tell them everything. I tell them about being evicted. I tell them I had nowhere to go. I tell them I heard Eleanor crying in that alley. I tell them how she couldn't remember her address, how she kept talking about William and the train station. I tell them I didn't call 911 because I'd been cuffed before for trying to help, and I didn't want her or me getting hurt because somebody panicked and drew the wrong picture in their head. I tell them I gave her my jacket and wrapped her in my mother's blanket and sat with her by that vent to block the wind and keep her awake. And the whole time I'm talking, this man, William, is just standing there with one hand over his mouth like every word I say is a punch to his chest. And when I finish, he doesn't yell. He doesn't accuse me. He doesn't ask me what I was doing. Near his house, he says, "And I'll never forget this. For as long as I live," he says, "you were dying to save my mother." And his voice cracks right in the middle. "You gave her your jacket, your blanket, your body heat. You stayed with her for 8 hours in 15-degree weather, and then softer, like he's talking to himself. Everything I failed to do." And I watch this billionaire, this man with more money than I could even imagine, start crying in front of me, like actually crying. And I'm lying there in a hospital bed like this is not real life. This is some movie I accidentally walked into. Yeah, that happened. I swear. Then he asks me one question that changed everything. "Do you have somewhere to go when they release you?" And I tell the truth. I tell him no, not really. "I'll figure it out, I always do." And he just shakes his head and goes, "No, you're not figuring it out on the street anymore. You're coming home with us, one." And I'm like, Sir, I can't, I don't want to be a problem. And he looks at me and says, You're not a problem. You're the reason my mother is alive. This is the part where a lot of people think the story ends. Rich man rescues poor kid, everybody claps roll credits. But that's not the story, and honestly, if it stopped there, I wouldn't even be telling you this, because what happened after is the actual miracle, and the part that might make you mad, depending on how you see the world. So stay with me here. We get to his house, and when I say house, I mean mansion. Like 12,000 square feet of marble and chandeliers and quiet. The kind of quiet that's so clean, you feel wrong, just breathing in it. And I'm walking in wearing hospital sweatpants and holding a plastic bag with the few things I own, and I feel like a stain walking across white carpet. And then out of nowhere, this little blonde rocket comes flying down the hallway. Socks, sliding hair and pigtails, maybe 10 or 11 years old. And she's like, Is this him? Is this Thomas? And next thing I know, she's hugging me like we've known each other forever. You saved Grandma Eleanor. You're a hero. And I can't even talk because nobody has ever said that word about me in my entire life. Not teacher, not cop, not neighbor, nobody hero. William goes, Lily, let him breathe. Kind of laughing through tears, like his body doesn't know if it's supposed to still be scared or start being grateful. And then the housekeeper, Patricia, she comes out and says, I've prepared a room for you, come with me. Like this is the most normal thing in the world, and she takes me upstairs and opens this door, and I swear to you, I stopped in the doorway and couldn't go in because I thought maybe I was misunderstanding. The room is bigger than the studio apartment me and my mom shared. When I was a kid, there's a real bed with a thick comforter and clean sheets, a desk by the window, a dresser, a closet with clothes in my size and a bathroom that is just mine. And I said, I can't stay here. This is too much. This is your house. And this little girl, Lily, looks dead serious at me and goes, It's your house too. Now I always wanted a brother. And my knees almost gave out. Pattern, interrupt. I actually had to sit down to keep from falling. Now I wish I could tell you. I relaxed and felt safe right away, that I believed I belonged there. But that would be a lie, because trauma doesn't turn off like a switch. Trauma stays in your bones. It whispers in your ear, so those first days I moved like a guest in a museum, quiet, careful hands close to my sides. So I didn't bump anything. I made my bed every single morning with military corners like I was in an inspection. Because I thought if they saw I took care of things, maybe they'd let me stay another day. I barely ate at dinner, even though the food smelled better than anything I'd had in years. Because I didn't want to look greedy, I answered questions with, yes, sir, and no, ma'am. I kept all my stuff in my backpack instead of the dresser, because I was sure it was temporary. I was sure any minute someone was going to pull me aside and say, listen, this was nice and all, but we can't actually keep you here. And I wanted to be able to grab my bag and bounce before it got weird. About a week in, William finds me in the library, and he says, Thomas, we need to talk. And my heart just falls through the floor, because if you grew up unstable, you already know what that sentence means. That sentence means get ready to leave. So I sit across from him and I say, it's okay, I get it. I can be packed in 5 minutes. And he just stares at me like I've spoken Martian and goes, what are you talking about? And I tell him, it's fine, this was generous. I don't want to be a burden. And I will never forget the look on his face when I said that word. Burden, because he almost got angry, not at me, at that idea. He ran his hands through his hair and said, Thomas, listen to me. You are not a burden. You are family. This is your home, and I need you to start acting like it. And I blink because I don't understand how to even process that. And then he hits me with something I did not see coming. He says, I've already started the guardianship paperwork. And I just stare like what? And he keeps going. I hired a lawyer to track down your birth certificate and get you proper ID. I opened a bank account. In your name, I'm hiring a tutor to get you prepped for your GED. And after you pass, we're enrolling you in school. This is not a weekend, pity thing. You're staying. You're my responsibility now. And I swear to you, that was the moment I believed him, not when he said, "You're coming home with us." But when he sat there and told me he was doing all the boring, ugly, un-Instagrammable paperwork stuff, because anybody can say, "You can sleep on my couch." Not everybody is willing to sit in an office with a lawyer and sign their name next to yours. If it were you, be honest, would you have trusted him at that point? Or would you still be waiting for it to disappear? From there, life didn't turn into a fairy tale. Let me be real about that. It turned into work, but for the first time in my life, it was work that led somewhere. I started studying. Every morning at the kitchen table with Mr. Rodriguez, the tutor. William hired retired teacher, calm voice, infinite patience. We sat at that table at 6 a.m., going through math. I hadn't touched in 3 years. Science terms I forgot existed, reading comprehension, social studies, the whole GED grind, and some days I felt stupid. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Some days, I wanted to slam the book shut and say, "I can't do this. I've been out too long. I'm broken. Whatever chance I had is gone." And on those days, you know who sat with me, Eleanor. We called her Gran by then, all of us, even me. Even though I'd only known her a few weeks because love doesn't really care about timelines. And on her clearer days, she was sharp and funny and sweet. And on her foggier days, she'd get lost in her own house and I'd walk with her same way I did that first night, slow and patient, talking soft, letting her hold my arm. One night, not long after I moved in, I'm sitting with Gran in the library, and she's having one of her clear stretches, and she looks at me and goes, "What was your mother's name?" And I tell her Sarah, and she smiles and says, "Sarah must have been a remarkable woman to raise a son like you." And I had to look away for a second, because grief hits in waves. You think you're standing, and suddenly you're underwater. Then after weeks of studying, that felt like swimming uphill in wet clothes, the GED test comes 4.5 hours, no breaks. That feel long enough, math, science, reading, social studies, my hands are sweating, my stomach's doing flips, and I walk out of there absolutely convinced I've failed. I tell Mr. Rodriguez, "I'm sorry I wasted your time." And he just smiles like, "We'll see." And I hate that answer because it's calm and I'm not calm. A few weeks later, there's an envelope in the mailbox with my name on it. And my hands are shaking so bad I can't open it. And Lily's bouncing next to me going, "Open it, open it." And I'm like, "I can't." And she's like, "Yes, you can." And I tear it open. And I'm staring at this piece of paper that says I passed, not just passed. I scored in the 90s in reading and social studies, high 80s in math and science. And I'm just standing there saying, "I did it, I did it, I did it." And Lily's screaming, and Patricia's crying in the doorway, and William comes running out of his office thinking something's wrong, and I'm like, I passed, I can go to college." And he pulls me into this hug, this full body, no distance hug, and I melt into it, because I have not been hugged by a father since I can remember. And that was the first time I let myself believe I might not lose this. That night we had dinner together, all of us like an actual family. And I don't use that word lightly. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, the whole Sunday dinner feeling, even though it wasn't Sunday. And Gran was having a good night, clear and focused, and she raised her glass of sparkling cider and said, "To Thomas, who reminds us what it means to be brave, what it means to be kind, what it means to be human." And nobody even breathed for a second, because we all felt what that meant. Now here's your twist, and I need you to hear it, because this is where people think they know the story, and they don't. Weeks later, I'm sitting with Gran in her room, reading to her from Pride and Prejudice, because she loves it, and out of nowhere she grabs my hand tight, way stronger than I expect, and her eyes cut through the fog like glass, and she says, "Thomas, I need to tell you something." And I say, "I'm here, Gran." And she looks at me and says, "That night when you found me, I wasn't just lost." And at first I don't get it. I say, "What do you mean?" And she says, "I mean, I knew I was outside. I knew it was cold. And I was so tired, baby. I was so tired of being confused. So tired of not knowing my own son's face. So tired of feeling myself slip away piece by piece." And her voice is shaking, but steady, like she's walking barefoot across broken glass, just to get this out. And I thought, maybe if I just stayed out there and went to sleep, it would be quiet, and it would be over. And my throat closes. I can't breathe because I realize what she's telling me. She's telling me she wasn't just lost, she was done. She was ready to let go. She was ready to let the cold take her. And then she squeezes my hand harder and says, "And then you came, and you wouldn't leave me, and you wrapped me in your own mother's blanket, and you talked to me all night, and you reminded me that life is worth living, even when you're tired, even when it hurts, because there are still people worth living for." And I just break. I start crying. I'm not even pretending to be strong anymore. Because here's this woman telling me I didn't just keep her body alive, I gave her a reason to stay. And let me tell you something, that is the heaviest blessing anyone can hand you. That was the moment I understood the truth. I thought I saved her, but she saved me too. That night didn't just give her a few more years. It gave me a family. It gave William a second chance to be present with his mom before Alzheimer's took more of her. It gave Lily a brother. It gave all of us a reason to build something bigger than just our own survival. That night rerouted every single life in that house, including mine. Gran passed a few weeks later, peaceful early morning sunlight on her face, hands folded, like she'd finally been able to rest. We buried her under a simple headstone with a line William picked. "Home is where someone waits for you." And at the graveside, I played Amazing Grace on the harmonica my mom gave me because that was Gran's favorite too, and I swear to you, I felt both of them there. My mother and my grandmother, by choice, standing on either side of me like bookends, so I wouldn't fall over. After that, everything shifted again, because grief will break you, but sometimes it points you too if you let it. And William, this man who used to live for meetings and flights and numbers, he looked at me one night and said, "I've been thinking about what matters, and I realized something. I built this giant company, and I thought that was success. And then I almost lost my mother walking barefoot in the snow while I was in another state, and I realized I was building the wrong thing." And he told me, "We're starting a foundation in her name for kids like you. For kids nobody sees, and I don't just want your story on a brochure. I want you in the room making decisions." And that's how the Eleanor Hartwell Foundation for Homeless Youth got born right there at his kitchen table. Not as a press move, not as a vanity project, but as a promise. We didn't just build beds, we built dignity. We got housing for kids aging out of foster care. We got them real ID and birth certificates. We got them tutors, GED prep therapy, job training, rides to interviews, clean clothes for court, someone to sit with them and say, "You are not invisible." And I want you to really hear this part because this is where I get heated. You know what this country does to kids who turn 18 in foster care? A lot of the time it says, "Congrats, you're grown now, good luck." And that's it. No apartment, no money, no family, no backup plan, just goodbye, and then people act shocked when that kid ends up sleeping in a car. So let me ask you, do you think that's fair? Do you really think that's on the kid? Or do you think maybe the system is built to drop them on their face and then blame them for falling? I want to see what you say in the comments on that, I really do. One night, not long after we opened our first site, this kid comes in, skinny hoodie, too thin for the weather. Backpack that obviously has everything he owns in it, eyes darting like a cornered animal. And he says his name is Marcus. And he's doing that thing I used to do, acting like he doesn't need anything, because needing something is dangerous. And I go sit with him and slide a plate of food across the table. Not shelter slop, real food, chicken, rice, vegetables, a piece of pie. And I tell him quiet, I was you. I was exactly you. I know that look in your eyes. I know the way your stomach feels right now. And this kid just breaks head down shoulders, shaking, crying into mashed potatoes, because nobody's talked to him like a person in weeks, maybe months. We got Marcus into housing, got him enrolled for his GED, sat with him through panic attacks, through court dates, through job interviews, through memories he didn't want to touch, because they burned. And months later, I'm sitting across from him, while he opens his own GED results, and he looks at me with tears in his eyes and says, You saved my life. And I said the same thing William once said to me, and the same thing Gran showed me. I said, You saved your own life. I just stayed. And that's when it really hit me. This is the point. This is the engine. This is how you change something bigger than just one night outside a mansion. One person stays. Then that person learns how to stay for somebody else, and it keeps rolling. 5 years after that night, we held a fundraiser at the house, the same house where I almost froze to death in front of a broken gate. And there's a bronze plaque there now, right by the stone alcove, where I wrapped Gran in my mother's blanket and prayed we'd both make it till morning. The plaque says, In memory of Eleanor Hartwell, who taught us that home is where someone waits for you and family is who stays. And during that fundraiser, when I snuck outside for some air because being called sir by men in suits still feels weird. Sometimes. Lily came out and stood next to me. She was taller by then, teenager, confident, scary, smart. And she said, You know what I think about? I think about what would have happened if you'd walked away that night. And I just stood there quiet because, I think about that too all the time, more than I admit. And then William came outside and looked at me, and he put his hand on my shoulder and said, You're my son, Thomas, in every way that matters, and I am so proud of the man you've become. And I don't care how tough you think you are. You hear that from a man you used to think of as a stranger, and you feel your knees go weak, period. And now, here we are, 10 years later. I'm almost 30s. I've got my degree in social work. I'm back in school working on my doctorate. I teach sometimes. I run programs at the foundation. My legal name is Thomas Wheeler Hartwell, We made it official. I sit in front of rooms full of future social workers, and I tell them the truth. Not the pretty version, the truth. I tell them I was 19 years old, sitting on frozen stone with frostbite chewing through my toes, and a woman in my arms who didn't even know her own address. And people always ask me, Why didn't you walk away? Why didn't you just call 911 and mind your business? Why did you give everything, including maybe your life, to save a stranger? And I always give the same answer, and it's not complicated. I say, because she needed someone and I was there. After one of those talks, this kid comes up to me, maybe 19. 20 skinny eyes, tired, way past his age, and he says real quiet, I aged out of foster care last month. I'm trying to stay in school. I've been sleeping in my car. I don't know how much longer I can do it. And his voice breaks on that last part, and I put my hand on his shoulder and say, Have you eaten today? And when he shakes his head, I say, All right. First, we're going to fix that. Then we're going to talk housing. Then we're going to talk next steps. You're not alone anymore. And he looks at me like I just pulled him up from underwater. And I think to myself, Gran, we're still doing it. We're still staying. So let me leave you with this, and I want honest answers in the comments. I'm serious. I read them. We live in a country where somebody can have a 12,000 square foot house and a gate system that costs $23,000, and at the exact same time a kid who just turned 18 can be sleeping behind a gas station because foster care said, "You're grown now, figure it out." And somehow we're supposed to act like that's normal, like that's just how it is. Do you think that's fair? Is that just the way the world works, survival of the luckiest? Or do you think it means something is broken in how we do family, how we do responsibility, how we look at people who don't come wrapped in the right package? I'll tell you what I think, and you can fight me in the comments if you want. I think kindness is not weak. Kindness is not, "Aw, that's sweet." Kindness is infrastructure. Kindness is the difference between invisible and alive. Kindness is the reason I'm sitting here telling you this story, instead of being a name on a list somewhere. Kindness is the reason that kid Marcus is in college now. Kindness is the reason that student who walked up to me after class is not sleeping in his car tonight. Kindness is the reason William has a family. Again, instead of just a house, kindness is the reason Lily has a brother. And not just a memory, kindness is the reason Gran didn't die alone in the dark. And it's the reason I didn't either. So here's what I want from you right now. Drop this in the comments. I'm serious. I want to see it. If it were you that night, freezing scared, knowing the system would probably not believe you, would you have stopped for her, or would you have kept walking to save yourself? And if you were William B. Real, would you have let a stranger into your home, called him your son, signed papers, or would you have said thank you and sent him on his way? And what do you think is broken? Is it just a few bad situations, or is the whole way we treat people who fall through the cracks messed up from the start? Tell me who stayed for you when you needed it. Tell me who didn't and how that changed you. Tell me what part of this story hit you in the throat, because I know there's one. And if you want more stories like this, real stories about real people, not just headlines, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, so you don't miss the next one. And more important than any of that, the next time life puts you in front of somebody who's cold and scared and alone. Ask yourself one question. Am I going to walk away, or am I going to stay?